In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to build a Chrome extension, and we'll be building this extension I have here. Think of it as a time limit, and I set how much time I want to spend on Twitter in a day. Here I have 120 minutes, which is 2 hours, but let's just say I make this 1 minute and I save. Because I've used Twitter more than 1 minute today, if I should refresh, it takes me to this page where it says, leave Twitter alone, do something productive. Now this is just a funny example, but we'll be walking through some concepts in this tutorial, which will enable you build your own extension which can do anything. So when you want to build your extension, you have your project directory, and the most important file you need in that directory is manifest.json. This is how you tell the browser how your extension should work. And on the right here, you have the configuration file, which has a bunch of fields. So you can reference this if you want to see how more fields work. But here I'm just going to use the manifest version, the name of my extension, the description, version 1.0. Let me remove the permissions for now. We'll see how that works later. And then we have this action field where we specify the default pop-up, which is when you click the extension, what should show. And then we have the default icon, which is pointing to logo.png. So logo.png looks like this. It's just something I designed in Figma by using the X logo and a cross sign. And then here I have my twitter.html, which is the pop-up. And this is just a simple document where I have this div and I have this h1 leave Twitter alone. Now, because I'm building this extension locally and it's not live yet, I need to go to my Chrome extensions and turn on developer mode. So currently developer mode is on, but if I turn this off, I will not be able to use my extension. So now when I put this on, then I can come to this load unpacked, and in load unpacked, I can go to my project directory. Currently this is Twitter extension, and I can select, and now I have this extension here. By default, the extension might not show here, but when I go to extensions and I go to manage extensions, here I'm going to see leave Twitter alone. I can go to the details and I can pin this to the toolbar, so I have it here. Now when I click on this, you see I have my simple documents, leave Twitter alone. One of the interesting things I learned is even if you specify a max width, it's not going to work. It's still going to use the maximum width that the content requires. But if I should make this width 300 pixels and comment this other one, if I come back here and I click this, you can see it's now 300 pixels. Let me just keep this at 200 pixels. So when you edit the pop-up page, you don't need to reload the extension. In some cases, you have to reload the extension to see your new changes. But since I'm just changing this, I don't need to reload. My changes will reflect directly. Okay, now that I have this, let me work on the script that is going to replace the Twitter page. Currently, if I go to x.com, there's nothing happening here. Here, I'll go to my manifest.json, and this is where I use another field called content scripts. Here, you define the script that should run on specific domains. I'm going to define one script. This is a JavaScript script. You can also use CSS. Then here I'm going to point this to script/replace page.js. And I want this script to run for these matches. So this is where you enter the domains that the script should run for. And I want it to run for https x.com/whatever. Now I can create my script directory, enter replace page.js. So this replace page.js script is going to run whenever I am on x.com. And we can actually check that out. Let's just say I do console log leave Twitter alone extension enabled. So I'll come to the console of my Twitter now. You can see when I refresh, I don't have that console log. So in this case where I'm changing a content script, I have to reload the extension. So if I reload the extension, I have a wrong file here. Oh, I spelled this wrongly. This should be replaced like this. Okay. So now if I try reloading the extension again, now it's reloaded. If I come back here and I refresh, now we have leave Twitter alone extension enabled. Then I'm also going to have this test page. This is where I have the content of my HTML document that should replace Twitter. So I just have this simple page here. You can make these as fancy as you want. And this is what the page looks like here. So I just have this as a test page. But what I'm going to do is I'll copy all of these as a string. I want to believe there is a way you can just get the HTML directly instead of having a string. But just for this tutorial, I'll keep this as a string. I'll go to replace page.js. I'm going to have a HTML string. I'm just going to paste this this here. I'm now going to replace the Twitter HTML with my own HTML. So here I have a function called replace page content. I will get the HTML element on the page, which is on the Twitter page here. Document.querySelector HTML. I'll call this HTML element. If the HTML element does not exist, I'll return. But if it exists, I'm going to replace the inner HTML with my own HTML string. Then here I'm going to call replace page content. If I refresh this isn't going to work, so I have to go back and reload my extension. And when I reload it and I refresh it, you can see now the HTML element on x.com is replaced with my own HTML string here. But this is not what I want. I want to have this replaced after a specific time of usage. So I'm going to take this off. Then I'll have some constants here. First constant is storage key time spent. This is going to have time spent on Twitter. Storage key dates, which is just going to be today's date. Then I'll also have a time limit, which is going to be in seconds. So if somebody enters a time limit like 20, that's going to be 20 times 60 to be seconds. But let me just keep these as 20 seconds for testing. Then here I'm going to have a variable called time spent. We'll keep incrementing this variable as the user spends more time on the website. I'm also going to have a variable called letIntervalID, which is also going to be updated because I'm going to run an interval which is going to run at maybe every second, and every second I'm going to be saving the time spent to the storage, and we can also clear the interval if we need to. Here I have my function called setTimer. This is where I'm going to run my interval. So this setTimer is going to have a from variable, which by default is 0, which means you can set a timer from 0 seconds, or you can set it from 50 seconds, or instead of from, I can have it as the base. So when we have the base, we're going to say time spent is equals to base. Then I'm going to run my set interval, and every 1 second this set interval is going to return an interval ID, so I can assign that to a variable. And in here I'm going to increase time spent by 1 second. Then here I'll check if the time has reached the limit, then I'll replace the page content, then I'll clear the interval. But if the time has not reached the limit yet, then I'm going to have local storage.setItem storage key time spent, and then I pass the time spent. Now how do I know if the time has reached the limits? I'm going to create another function here, is it time up, and this is going to take the time spent, and here I'm just going to return time spent greater than or equal to limit. Oh, this should be limit, not limt. I can replace this comment with if is it time up, passing the time spent. I'm going to call replace page content, and then I'm going to clear the interval ID, and then I return. I don't even need to use const here since I already have my interval ID, my global variable here. I'm just going to update the global variable from this set interval. But if it is not time up, then I'm going to update the storage with the current time spent. Then I'm going to have another function called init. This is just going to be the function called when the page loads. In this init, I'm going to get the saved today's date, which means the today's date that was saved in the storage key date. And then I get the actual today's date, new dates. So this is what was saved before, and this is the actual today's date when this init function is called. Then here I'm going to check if both dates are the same. So if they are the same, that means we are still in today. But if they are different, well, that means probably this was yesterday and then this is today, which means we have to restart our timer. So here again, I'm going to create a function called is it same day. This function is going to take date 1 and date 2. Then I'm going to have my dates object 1, which is going to be new date, and I pass date 1, and then I do the same thing for date 2. And now to check if they are the same day, I can check the year, month, and the date. So if the date, the month, and the year are the same, then we know it is the same day. So here const same day is equal to is it same day, and then I pass the saved today's date and the actual today's date. If it is the same day, then I'm going to get the time spent in the local storage. Const saved time spent is equals to local storage dot get item storage key time spent. This is going to come in form of string, so I can also convert it to a number. So save time spent in num, pass int saved time spent. I can check again if this time has already reached the limit. Is it time up? If yes, then again I'm going to call replace page content, and then I return, so the function stops here. But if it is not time up yet, then I'm going to call set timer. The base is now going to be saved time spent in num. So if the previous save time was 10 seconds, for example, if 10 seconds is already more than the limit, then we replace the page content. But if it is not more than the limit, then we set our timer to start from 10 seconds, and so the timer is now going to continue from 11, 12, 13, 14. But then if it is not the same day, then I'll call local storage.set item. Don't worry, we're going to see how all of this works in a second. The storage key date, and then I pass actual today's date. It's important for me to keep the today's date so I can always know if a time spent is related to a particular date, so that I don't calculate the limit of a previous day with today. And then here I'm going to call set timer with the base as 0. So since it is not the same day, we know this is a new date, and then we can start our timer from 0. I can now call this init function when the page loads and our extension also loads. Here in our limit we have 20 seconds. I'll come to the application tab here. I'm going to reload my extension so that my content script can work. Now if I should refresh, well, in the console we have today's date, which is September 4, and then we have time spent on Twitter, which is 5, 6, 7. Now if I should close the page, remember our timer stopped at 12. So when I open the page again, this init function is going to be called, and from this init function we're going to see that we are still on the same day. We check, is it time up yet? It's not yet time up, so we continue our timer from 11 or 12. Well, let me open the page again, go to the console. So it's continuing from 12, 13, 14, 15, 19, and when it gets to 20, our page is replaced. Well, it didn't actually get to 20, but on the 20 mark, then the page is replaced with this, which means if I should close this page, currently I'm on the other test page. Let me remove that. So I've closed that page. When I open the page again, you can see it's replaced. So what happens is, because this is the same day, and then we get the time spent in the storage, and because it's already running out of time, well, it's 19, but it's getting to 20, then we replace the page content. And with this, we already have our basic feature, which allows us to not use Twitter after we have used it for a specific time. Now, an extra feature that we can add here is, if you are not on the Twitter tab, the timer should stop calculating. What I mean by this is, let me go to the application tab, and I'm just going to make this 0. If I want to still use Twitter, I can always come here to change it back to 0. So now if I should refresh, it's counting 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I leave the Twitter tab, it is still counting. When I go back, you can see it continues on 7, 8, 9, 10. So one thing I want to do here now is, if I'm not on the tab currently, then the timer should stop calculating. So that way I can actually calculate how much time I spent on the Twitter tab. So I'm going to have documents.add event listener visibility change. This event listener is triggered when a tab becomes active or not active. So if I leave this tab to another tab, visibility change will be triggered on this tab, and when I come back, visibility change will be triggered again. But how do I know if I am leaving the tab or visiting the tab? Well, this is where I can access the document.hidden property. So document.hidden is false if this tab is not visible, and if it is visible, document.hidden is true if this tab is not visible, but when it is visible, then document.hidden becomes false. So if document.hidden is true, then I'm going to call clear interval, and I pass my interval ID. Remember, I kept this as a global variable so that I can access it anywhere. But then if I am visiting the tab and visibility change is triggered, I'm going to call init again. Init, as we have seen so far, is just going to pick up from where we stopped. Okay, now that we have this, I'm going to come here and change it again to 0. I refresh and it's counting 1, 2, 3. When I leave, visibility change is called, the document is hidden, so our interval stops running. Now when I go back, oh, it still kept counting. Oh, that's because I didn't reload the extension. Sorry. Then I come back here and go to 0 and refresh. So we have 1, 2, 3. Then I leave the tab, visibility change is called, our interval stops running, and when I go back, it continues back from 4, 5, 6, 7 until it gets to the point where the whole content is replaced. 19, 20. But what we have so far is a hard-coded limit of 20 seconds. But what if we actually want the user of our extension to be able to set the time limit? Then this is where we can use other features of extensions. For this, I will go back to my twitter.html, which is the pop-up here. Just going to paste some HTML which I have created earlier just to save time. So here I have current info, which shows current limit, and here I'm going to put the limit with JavaScript. Then here I have my form, and in this form it has duration form, we have label, input, and the button save, and then we have this JavaScript file which I'm going to create now. So main.js. So this main.js is going to run for this pop-up. When I come here now, well, we have this, but let me paste some styles so it looks nice. So if I come here now, we have something like this. It will show the current limit to allow you to set a specific limit, and then you can save that limit. Now let's go to main.js. I'm going to have a storage key limit. Then I'm going to get the duration input, which is going to be document.getElement by ID duration input. Then I get the limit element, which is this span here, because this is where I'm going to add the current limit that is saved. Then I have the duration form. Then I'm going to get the currently saved limit. We haven't saved anything yet though, but for this I can do a local storage get item, and then I pass the storage key limit. If there is a saved limit value, then on this limit ELEM, I'm going to modify the inner text to be saved limits seconds. And then I will also update the input value to be saved limits. I don't think I need to reload my extension for this to work. Now when I click on this, we have current limits this, and it's not showing anything here because we don't have anything in the storage. Now one thing to be careful of is when you use local storage like this in the main.js of this pop-up, it's not going to be the same local storage as the one for Twitter. When you use local storage, it's always going to work in the context of what you're using local storage for. And if you want to see that local storage, you can right click on the extension and click inspect pop-up, and here we can go to application to see the local storage for our pop-up. In a second, I'm going to show you why it's important to keep in mind that local storage works differently for the different context of your extension. So here in main.js, I'm now going to add an event list now in the duration form, submit. So when you submit the form with your new limit, the first thing I'll do is to prevent the default behavior of forms. Then I'll get the new limit, which is duration input dot value. Then I'll call local storage set item, pass the storage key limit with the new limit. I'm just going to copy these two lines. So when I update the storage, I can update the limit lm inner text to be the new limit. I don't need this line since the input already holds that value. So now when I come back to this pop-up and I enter a limit like 20 and I click on save, you can see we now have current limit 20 seconds. No, actually this should be minutes, not seconds. Okay, let's start afresh. If I enter 30 and I save, you see the current limit is 30. And if I should inspect this again, we're going to see the local storage. So application, in the local storage, we have time limit for Twitter 30. And as you can see, the local storage on x.com is not affected. So now that we have this time limit as 30, how can we share that information with our content script, which is replace page? The truth is we'll not be able to share that information because the local storage are different. If you want to be able to share that information with your content script, that this is where you use the Chrome storage API. I have the reference open here just to explain what I mean. So here we're talking about Chrome.storage API to store, retrieve, track changes. And then here it says, even though you can use the storage interface, it is not recommended because the extensions service worker cannot access storage. The content scripts share storage with the host page. Just as we have seen in our manifest, this content script is going to share storage with x.com and not with our extension, which means our extension cannot access the local storage of our content script, and the content script can also not access the local storage of our extension. And then it also says data saved using the storage interface is lost when you clear browser history. So what we're going to use here now is the Chrome storage API instead of local storage. And to use that, I have to go to my manifest, add permissions. I would like to use the storage API. The storage API has a similar syntax with your local storage, but it works asynchronously. So here in our main.js, instead of using the local storage.setItem, what we're going to use now is chrome.storage.local.set. Then here we pass an object where the key in that object is going to be the key in the storage and the value is going to be the value. I'm going to pass this using the bracket notation because I want to use my variable. So storage key limit, and the value I want to pass is new limit. Now, like I said, this works asynchronously, so you can use a callback function, you can use then, and you can even use await. I'm just going to use a callback function for this. So after we set, then we have a callback function, and then here we can just say console log new duration is saved in storage. Then we pass the new limit plus minutes. And then here where we also do saved limit local storage.getItem, instead we're going to have chrome.storage.local